This is a video for James Gunn. You can watch it if you're not James Gunn, but you are not the target demographic. James Gunn. Superman must have his little red trunks in your upcoming Superman film, Superman Legacy. This is not a joke to me. I know, you say to yourself, if this is only a video for James Gunn, then why did you make it available early for your patrons at patreon.com/thoughtslime? Obviously, because I cannot rule out the possibility that James Gunn is a patron and would appreciate the gesture. James. Jimmy? Mr. Gunn? Daddy. First of all, big fan from way back in the Slither days. I like your movies. Thank you for making movies that, generally speaking, I like. Let's get that out of the way. I've never made any movies. I'm just some random, devastatingly sexy internet genius, so I appreciate you hearing me out on this. I know your time is valuable, so I'll get right to the point. I'm begging you, James Gunn. Give Superman his little underpanties in your Superman movie. It is shockingly important to me. I'm worried about what kind of mental state I'm going to be in if you don't. I love the Superman. I think he's neat. He means a lot to me. I've talked about him in the past on this channel. Behold, the viewing globe. Every single good Superman story revolves around one unsolvable question. How would a person with unlimited strength and a perfect moral compass behave? And no superhero better illustrates the potential for more positive superhero stories than Superman. The guy that everyone agrees, okay, you're allowed to make this one nice. You don't have to make this particular guy grim and gritty. I mean, you can, but you don't have to. You know, like when you read a comic book, like a comic book for children, rated T for teen, you know, you crack open any comic book you read nowadays, and all you see is hardcore penetrative sex. That's all they make anymore. I just want to see a comic book about Spider-Man fighting the big wheel. But whenever I open a comic book these days, Spider-Man merely guzzles cum. Every comic book I pick up today, it's just Spider-Man drinking gallons and gallons of cum. People ask, yeah, who's even watching all these superhero movies at this point? Who are they for? And it's me. I'm sorry, I know. I'm on the wrong side of history on this one. I get that. You know, it's just like, they remind me of toys that I owned when I was a child and how I would bang them together and make little stories with them. I'm sorry that they became the only movies that anyone ever makes anymore. That isn't my fault, and it isn't your fault, James Gunn. But I worry. I don't have to tell you, James Gunn, that movie studios tend to have a difficult time adapting Superman for modern audiences. There's always a lot of talk about whether or not he's still relevant in a world where we can all go blast our synopses with Fortnite and whatever. This guy's jumping tall buildings? Who gives a shit? That's not gonna do it for me anymore. I could be watching Rick and Morty. And what could be more symbolic of the outdated, difficult to relate to aspects of Superman as a character, James Gunn, than him wearing his underwear outside his pants, a choice very few people can relate to, and thus, one of the first aspects of the character put on the chopping block. Well, I think that's a load of hogwash. Some real baloney, pardon my French. Stories don't need to be relevant in order to be entertaining or meaningful. Do you think a single second of Succession is relevant to me in my life? I have never been in a high-stakes corporate merger or a succession battle with my toxic siblings over who gets to be the CEO of a multinational corporation. And I'm gonna take a wild guess and say I'm probably never gonna be in either of those situations. I can relate to exactly none of it. Still a great show. Superman is like Archie from Archie, in that even though his stories are usually set in modern times, they're carrying forward weird, antiquated elements from the times they were first set in. Archie drives an old jalopy and drinks milkshakes down at the malt shop with his gal. Superman works at a newspaper, remember those? And changes in phone booths. Kids react to phone booths. Why? Because that's Superman, baby. That's the imagery. That's what he does. And it feels weird to change it, even though it does feel like it doesn't really make a lot of sense anymore. It's just, that's the way we like it. It's familiar. We like it that way. And that's fine. It doesn't have to feel realistic because at its heart, the Superman story is very silly. And I don't say that to be disparaging, James Gunn. I think you recognize that the absurdity of superhero comics is part of the appeal. But in modern times, we tend to think that superheroes should be a bit more realistic. They should be a bit more plausible. We like to explain away some of the sillier story tropes or update them to make them a little bit more credible. And that usually works well enough, but it's a difficult balance to maintain. On the one hand, James Gunn, some of the stuff in those stories is antiquated and foolish. Like, there's no harm in freshening something up, right? Like, the old stuff is still there if you want to read it. Nobody wants the same stories regurgitated endlessly to them, except people that complain on YouTube. But not the way that I'm doing it, in the other bad way.
Warner Brothers, you are idiots. Absolute idiots. And you've always been idiots.
Like, we can go back and read an old comic about Superman fighting a gorilla if we want to, but we want new stories where Superman fights new gorillas. So some things change to suit the tastes of modern audiences, but you have to be careful not to change too much, or you start to lose out on the appeal of the character in the first place. So much of the fun of Superman stories is knowing that they exist in conversation with 90 years of collaborative storytelling. If Lex Luthor first appeared in a comic book today, who would care? Oh, he's an evil business guy. Okay, there's a lot of those, in real life and in fiction. What makes seeing Lex Luthor exciting is that there's this long, extended history of other stories about him that you can draw from. This sprawling legacy. Superman Legacy, that's the name of the movie you're making. Wow! This brings us back to the Super Panties. I always come back to the Super Panties. They're always there for me. They're my rock. Here's the thing about Superman's little underwears. They're so iconic that wearing underpants outside your regular overpants has become visual shorthand for superheroes. Sure, it was originally meant to reference like circus strongmen in the 1930s or whatever, but nowadays that connotation has largely disappeared. We don't go to circuses anymore. We don't see strongmen there, because circuses are full of weak men now. And it's just become this weird, inscrutable thing that superheroes do for no reason. These studios are right that Superman isn't relevant to modern audiences. That's the fun. That's why we enjoy him. He is inherently a throwback, no matter what you do with him. He represents a corny optimism that's foreign to people in the depressing world of 2023. There's something really old-fashioned about the way he is presented, because we don't really write characters to be like that anymore. He's endlessly hopeful, kind, patient, and just like a real goody-goody. You know, a Boy Scout type of guy. A big blue Boy Scout. It's hard to relate to that in a lot of ways, because if I had Superman's powers, there are some people and institutions I'd be very eager to heat vision to death. First on the list, people who keep taking Superman's underwear away. I don't know about you, James Gunn, but I've always seen Superman as a more aspirational character instead of a relatable character, right? I relate to Lois Lane or Jimmy Olsen, the people in Superman's life with human flaws and fallibilities who are inspired by his example and their own innate decency to do good. And being presented with an aspirational figure like that should chafe a little, at first anyway. He should remind us of all the things we could be, but we aren't. And that should feel bad a little bit. People naturally would see that and they'd want to tear him down a peg, right? Because they don't want to admit that there's somebody out there being a better person than them. It's easier to just say he's a big phony. Nobody could be that good, because otherwise the impetus is on them to do better. And that's in the fiction, right? Because he's not real, so you can write him however you want. But I think like this same attitude is part of why cynical writers like to write evil Superman analogs or directly write evil Superman. The idea being, I guess, if Superman was a real person, he'd be a big asshole. To be an asshole is, of course, more realistic than not being an asshole, because we've all met assholes. We know they're around. None of us have ever met a person who isn't an asshole. That type of person is largely theoretical. It's hard to even imagine a nice guy. It just doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel right. Why would there be a nice guy? It doesn't make any sense. And that, specifically, is why when Superman does act like a nice guy, it feels refreshing. That feels novel to us at this point. But, that's not entirely fair to those writers, because in defense of evil Superman analogs, I do get it. Like, I get it. There's an element of Superman's righteousness that could be pretty regressive if done poorly, which it usually was. Superman's status quo as a moral paragon is largely a byproduct of the way that, for much of the character's history, there was a literal, actual codified list of ways that he had to behave in order to keep busybodies from tut-tutting comic books right off the shelves. I'm not going to go too far into the history of this, right? But here's the very, very simplified, bare bones version. Not going to get all the details. Okay, but basically, a dingus man named Frederick Wortham wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent, which caused a moral panic, and it claimed that comic books were leading to juvenile delinquency. In order to prevent boycotts from more credible parents, the industry agreed to this ridiculously puritanical self-censorship agreement with an independent body monitoring them called the Comics Code Authority. And that seems very silly to us in hindsight because now old-timey comic books are associated with that exact puritanical, safe, and wholesome type of story. But that's because of the code. At the time, the most popular comics were all horror and crime stories with blood and guts, so it's a little easier to see why parents might not want their kids reading them, because they're not cool like you and me, James Gunn. We'd let kids read whatever violent comics they want. Also, no bedtime, breakfast for dinner. The CCA stipulated that evil had to always lose and good had to always win, because of course, if we allowed evil to win, kids might get the ridiculous idea that evil could win in real life and start to think, hey, wait a minute. What if things need to change in the real world? And that, of course, would inevitably lead to communism. The heroes had to be this sexless, viceless archetype of white male American purity. Just square-jawed, barrel-chested, smiling patriarchs who always knew right from wrong. It made all of these stories sanitary to the point of parody. No good person could have flaws. No bad person could have any redeeming qualities. And all of the stories must contain an unambiguous moral lesson for the little kiddos out there. Nobody could kiss without getting married. Law enforcement is always good. Crime is always bad. And there's no gay people in the world, obviously. What was and what was not considered immoral was, of course, guided by the expectations of a particular class of people with a particular set of rich white interests. Good thing nothing like that happens nowadays, right, James Gunn? Good thing nobody nowadays wants to ban books they view as subversive on the basis that they could corrupt the minds of the youth. Good thing that when bad things have happened in the past, we always learn our lessons, right? So these Silver Age Superman stories, which are the oldest Superman stories that anyone alive today actually could have read as a child, were forced to adapt to this weird, stodgy, propagandistic approach. And this is also when superheroes began to entrench themselves as the dominant genre for American comic books. Superheroes can follow the comics code's ridiculous demands really easily, because it's obvious, for example, who is good and evil in a superhero story. You can tell by the colors. Red, yellow, and blue are good, purple and green are evil. You can make a superhero story exciting without anything objectionable to any sticks in any kind of mud. You don't need sex, drugs, or explicit violence, because instead, you could have Spider-Man. And also, the code was partially written to specifically forbid other more popular genres of comic, so that helped too. Now, when we think of comic books in the West, we think of superheroes. And when we think of superheroes, and Superman in particular, as he's the model that all subsequent superheroes have followed to one degree or another, we think about this type of reactionary, stuffy, patriarchal, jingoistic bullshit. Truth, justice, and the American way, but come on. The American way is not always truthful or just, for example, James Gunn, and I don't want to get political here, slavery, for example, that wasn't a just thing to do. Or the Iraq War, a lot of lies involved in that one. I think we can agree on that. Superman's whole style and attitude feels old-fashioned and quaint, because it is. He's literally from a different time. And that time was not great for a lot of people, to say the least. There's no getting around that. And every attempt to do so is just so fucking embarrassing. I don't want an edgy Superman who swears or who kills people or who smokes big fat super blunts. The problem was never that he was corny. The problem is that corniness emerged from a desire to protect a restrictive status quo. I like the corny guy. I want him to win people over by being nice. They see him, they see his whole super steez, and they're like, what's up with this Dorcas Malorcas? He looks like a Dorcas and furthermore a Malorcas. They worry, like we would, he's going to be a self-righteous, stodgy old asshole, someone who acts like they care about the right things, but is just as debauched and cruel as the rest of us. You just know, behind the scenes, he's probably sending Wonder Woman dick pics and going to Epstein Island with Batman. But then, by the end of the story, they would feel inspired and heartened by his positivity and upbeat hopefulness. That actually it is good to aspire to be a good person and to be kind. And that doesn't have to come with a finger-wagging puritanical extremism. You can be kind and still be chill, is the thing. And I ask you, James Gunn, what better way to immediately visually signify to an audience that this guy, he's a little bit hokey, a little bit corny, a little bit cringe, than to have him in his little underwear, Hey man, we can see your underwear. It's outside your pants. What a silly thing to wear. Let us all point and laugh, and I'm sure I will never learn a lesson about conflating cynicism with wisdom from this. Do you see now, James Gunn, how the underpants speak to the very core of the character? Do you see how if they're not there, my therapist says she's worried I might have a complete break with reality? Now I'm going to take a big swing here, James Gunn. I'm going to make a little prediction, and I could be wrong. I'm definitely not, but I'm guessing that this movie, in some capacity, will be about Superman's son, Jonathan Kent, learning to live up to his father's name. Given that the title of the movie is Superman Legacy, I'm guessing legacy might be a big theme. Could be wrong, definitely not. Let's see how this one ages. I'm going to meet you halfway here, James Gunn. Clark has to wear the underwear. That's non-negotiable. You owe me that much. I'm not responsible for what I do if he doesn't have them. But Jonathan doesn't have to. Jonathan can decide that being Superman doesn't have to mean wearing little panties. He can be a cheery, upbeat righter of wrongs without the underwear. That's his journey. In this way, Clark represents tradition for tradition's sake, not harmfully so necessarily, but he's stuck in his ways. He's always done things like this and it works for him, so he doesn't feel a need to reinvent himself. And that's kind of what we like about him, right? The power and appeal of Superman is that he's always been around. There's an inertia to him, which started way before any of us were alive to remember it. You don't got to explain it to us. He's friggin' Superman. We know what he's like. He wears underwear outside his pants. We know that. It anchors us. It keeps us from lashing out at people. It's the only thing some of us have left. But Jonathan as a character is all about searching for identity. He's saddled with the baggage of being the son of the world's most beloved and impossibly perfect guy. The biggest possible shoes to fill. How do you learn to be yourself with all of those expectations on you? And what's more, should you? Should you be yourself? Or does the world need you to be that? Does the world need Superman more than you need a coherent sense of self? And do you owe that to the world? How do you know when you've done enough? How do you manage how people see you, especially when it might not be how you see yourself? Boy, pretty relatable, wouldn't you say? Warner Brothers? Plus also, hey, James Gunn, there's some commentary there, right? About how youth culture is so image conscious, and it doesn't matter. Superman's costume is silly. We all know that. We're grown adults, me and you. What matters is the good thing Superman does. But a young guy might be really embarrassed to wear something silly. It would feel much more important to a young Superman that he looks cool than that he maintains an arbitrary tradition. And honestly, maybe it is. Like, traditions are sometimes not worth preserving. Let them go when they don't serve you anymore. That's fine. I mean, not you, James Gunn. Do not do that. Maintain this tradition of Superman wearing underpants as though my life depended on it, because narratively speaking, though, that juvenile desperation to be seen as cool just so happens to mirror the ways that big corporations that own these characters have treated them very disrespectfully in the past, trying to make them more hip and cool to today's youth. I mean, to make them more PogChamp in ways that cheapened their original appeal, made them all very mid and peepo cringe. You could just have a fun montage of Jonathan Kent trying on all the try-hard replacement costumes that Warner Brothers and DC trotted out over the years. He's trying to reinvent himself. And the Superman legacy, wink. Oh no, I was probably supposed to act. But it's not about Superman, It was never about Superman. Superman's underpants represent so much more than just Superman. Let's face it, James Gunn, people are pretty divided nowadays. Everybody takes sides in every little thing in this endless, pointless shouting match. We conflate aesthetics and values. People who agree with me drink fancy coffees and dye their hair and listen to the smartest, most boring podcasts. People who don't agree with me drive big trucks. They wear camo print to the grocery store, and they drink domestic beer, but not Bud Light anymore because a woman drank it on Instagram, and I guess that made them mad for some reason. The culture war has become a fashion statement, a series of things to buy or not buy so you can display your allegiance to one side or another, a performance. We're tearing each other apart because of which commercials we agree with, sometimes literally on purpose, which brands we associate with, how we manage our self-image, and it makes it hard to see our shared humanity, hard to believe that people who behave differently in superficial ways can still be kind, decent people, and that makes it easy for bad actors to sow the seeds of hate, to turn us against one another, to turn us against the vulnerable people in our communities. But Superman is in a unique position in that he straddles both sides of these politicized aesthetics. Both sides would want to claim him. Both sides relate to how he presents himself. I mean, think about it. He grew up on a farm in rural Kansas. He drives tractors and is considered a traditional American icon. He looks like a fucking flag. It's all visual symbols that American conservatives relate to. But he's also a campy big city metrosexual refugee and beacon of diversity and tolerance. He loves being theatrical and wearing skin-tight spandex. He is, like me, fully cocked and woke-pilled. He's both, and he's neither, because both of these political aesthetics are bullshit. They don't matter. They're just marketing. They're window dressing. What matters is how you treat people. What matters is the good you do in the world. And you can do good no matter what you look like, no matter what your vibe is. And James Gunn, what better way to signify that aesthetics don't matter? It's who you are on the inside that matters. That we should all strive to be kind and decent, no matter how we appear on the surface, than to have our hero wear a very silly thing on the surface. You don't want to take him seriously, because he looks silly. How could a guy that looks that silly be a serious guy? He can't. He's a silly guy. But then he wins you over by being kind, and you think, maybe I shouldn't be so judgmental. Maybe I should give people a chance. Cards on the table, James Gunn. I think Superman's underwear is the only thing that can heal our divisions. I do think that without Superman's underwear, we are lost. Deep down, I believe people are good. At least we want to be. We only lack the light to show us the way, and that's Superman's underwear. That's what they mean. I'm speaking slowly now, and you can tell from that what I'm saying is important. It doesn't matter what people look like on the outside, but in one specific case, it absolutely super matters. It matters a whole lot. It does matter that Superman wears underpants. If you take away nothing else from this video, James Gunn, it's that it's important to all of us, to all of our lives, to the health of political discourse, that the strong cartoon man looks like how I want him to look. Do you know what fabric those underpants are made of, James Gunn? The social fabric. The social fabric of our entire civilization. That's what's at stake here. Also, it kind of breaks up the design a little, and like otherwise there's a lot of more blue. It's not really well balanced, and it gives him a better sense of where he's positioned in space. Makes the action a little easier to read, so that's another good reason you could include them. Thank you for your time. I know your time is valuable. You're a busy man, James Gunn, so I just want to say thank you for watching, and I will start executing hostages if you don't announce the underpants within 24 hours. Yeah, I don't know about this one. I don't know why I did this video either. Please like and subscribe. This won't happen again. I won't ever make this video again. Go to patreon.com/thoughtslime. Yeah, I really fucked up this time.